Watching keyboard reviews, you see the word premium thrown out a lot.
But what does premium mean, and does it really matter?
Okay, so maybe we can start talking about what premium means to us.
Sure. For me, premium kind of lives in two categories. One of them is the emotional side, let's say, and the other one is the practical one. Although both of them kind of blend on different points. And on the emotional side is like, how do you feel when you kind of touch a premium product or you experience a premium experience, right? So there's a component that is social or cultural in the sense of what the world thinks about something being premium or not premium. So let's say, for example, if you have a car, when you close the door, you hear a boom, right? Or
A thunk.
A thunk. Great point, like with the keycaps, exactly, right? So we could say, no, but that's premium. But actually, also there's a social component there where the more expensive cars have that feature and the cheaper cars don't have that feature. Although with time, cheaper cars are kind of improving and being able to replicate these premium feelings without the premium materials, engineering, and so on, right? So we have that emotional side, but we also have the practical side. So durability. Aluminum will last longer than plastic, right? So this is something that, although culturally we are aware of this, we also know that if a white plastic product will turn yellow in 10 years, let's say, an aluminum one won't, right? So there's these two sides. And I could extend and continue talking deeper on the emotional or the practical side, but what does premium mean to you?
Okay, I think I really connect with that emotional and practical side, but I don't with that emotional part having a lot to do with the senses and with the cultural part. So it's not only what you touch, but what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste. Not for a keyboard, but maybe what you smell.
Yeah.
Everything is connected, and that is the emotional part. But I also think that in the emotional part, there's things related to UX, where it's how the keyboard makes you feel while using it, but not because of your senses, but about the experience. You feel that you're learning it fast or that it's easy to use.
Okay, so kind of for you, simplicity is part of premium.
Yes, it doesn't have to be simple, but feel simple. So
Okay.
maybe it has a good learning curve, for example.
And actually, we could say that it's more premium if it looks complicated, but then it feels simple, right? Because then you feel like, oh, I've accomplished this without even making an effort, right?
Yes, that for me, premium has a little bit of that.
Okay, let's explore this kind of premium feeling and features in the realm of keyboards. Okay, so we have here a few keyboards, and at the beginning you mentioned that sometimes you read an article or watch a video and they talk about the premium keyboard, but we don't really agree with it. So what about we talk about the keyboards that we have around, that here in the office we have a ton of them, and maybe we can share our thoughts about what really is a premium keyboard.
Yeah, what makes a keyboard premium.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe we can start with something that is easy. You mentioned materials, and maybe we can start discussing materials.
Sure.
That would be an easy starting point.
For sure.
So maybe we have a few keyboards here. Maybe we can start with one that is very popular, even though it's not an ergonomic keyboard. It's a Keycap.
Yeah, so Keycap, I would say, inside the mechanical keyboards, cheap-ish, let's say.
Affordable?
Affordable, yes, affordable. So yes, for the ones that are in the hobbyists, let's say, that go into the rabbit hole, it's cheap. For the ones that are not in the hobby, it's expensive probably, or it's on the expensive side.
A cheap $30 keyboard,
exactly,
this is maybe 100 and something, depending on which model you choose. Then it's more expensive.
Okay, so here we're talking about the build quality, materials, and so on. So the case is kind of metal, but it's painted metal. It's not brushed or anodized. Does it mean that painted is worse than brushed or anodized? Kind of, yes, because anything that is painted is easily chipped through time, and at the same time, it's a magnet for fingerprints, in this case, because of the finishing. So if we compare it to plastic, obviously plastic is worse, right? But on the other side, then we have the base. The whole base is plastic, and if we talk about the legs or whatever, I would say everything's okay. okay in the sense of
like there's nothing wrong with it, but nothing you would highlight.
Nothing exactly.
Like the plastic is not finished; it doesn't have
anything particular.
Maybe it could have a sticker or a better finish on top of that.
And I know that if I scratch really hard with my nail or with anything, it will be damaged very easily. But the thing is, like, someone could perceive this as a premium build if they don't really have the knowledge of what a premium build is. And that's what we were talking about, culture and knowledge before, right? Because if you come from a place or an environment where everything is this kind of cheap HP keyboards that they were used in banks long time ago.
You come from something you can bring this up for a moment. If you come from something like this,
yes, exactly.
Then of course that is
this is
a big step forward.
Yeah, and then you can perceive this as premium. So again, if you pick up this keyboard and you're like, wow, this is amazing, then you're feeling this premium feel.
Yeah, I think
even though objectively it's not, right? So there's a very important part of kind of your own perception, and that's maybe why when we watch reviews of products that clearly are not premium, they say they are premium, because maybe those people haven't been exposed to all this, let's say, industrial processes, materials, etc., right? So if you, for example, I know you study architecture, right? So you can enter a building and you can really appreciate if that building was properly designed, right? But I enter a building and probably I cannot, right? I can say if I'm comfortable or not, but I cannot say, wow, this space has been designed in such an amazing way. And you could be amazed by
I think that connects with something that now that you bring this analogy, one of the things that maybe people are tricked into premium is through aesthetics. Mm-hmm. You know, the same way that some buildings will dazzle you, but me as an architect would say, yeah, you're being dazzled by these gimmicks or by these shapes or by the way this is done, but this is actually not well designed. And this, on the other side, buildings that are ugly to the naked eye or ugly to the untrained eye, but they're like perfectly well designed, you know, well balanced. It's a wood layout. It's gonna be great to use, but it's not as flashy.
Okay, so we're talking about the base materials, but there's more things that make it feel more premium or less premium, but again connected to how much knowledge you have. So for example, if we look at these keycaps, the profile of these keycaps is all the same, and at the same time the spacing between keycaps is just too wide, right? So it really feels like they got regular keycaps and they kind of cut them. That I don't know if that's what they did, but when you look at it, it's like, okay, this spacing is kind of off, right?
And it's all R3, right?
Yeah,
which is a bit
kind of
wild choice. Yeah,
that's a nice way of putting it. It's a wild choice, right? So if you have no knowledge about keyboards and you just come from this plastic HP, then you would probably not notice any of this, right? But if you know this and you see this keyboard, you're like, okay, this is like the bare minimum of being acceptable. Let's say it.
Maybe with the analogy of cars, if you're coming from a Dacia or, you know, a really cheap car and you get a BMW, that would feel premium, but there's much more.
Yeah, much higher.
Example, you know, the BMW, you can have a very good Jaguar or a very good Maserati or an Aston Martin, you know,
whatever,
you know, going forward. So yeah.
Okay, so we were using this keyboard as an example, and by the way, we're not saying this is a bad keyboard. No. We're just trying to explain kind of this approach or this understanding of premium. Okay, so let's get into the ergonomic realm. Okay, so let's start maybe talking about our keyboard. So we make a big effort on trying to make it premium. So let's use any component to highlight this. So for example, the palm rest. So for, I don't know, maybe 5 years, we've been trying to make a palm pad that has this level of squishiness, let's say it, or softness. It's like, it's soft when you touch it at the top, but it's firm enough at the bottom. And at the same time, it has taken quite some effort to make it magnetic, right? So it can happen that you don't really appreciate this. But if you look in the market, there's no other palm rest like this. So if there's no other palm rest in the market like this, how can a person know if this is premium or not? So one of them is communication. On our side,
like we're doing right now,
making
this is premium.
Believe us. Yes. So, but on the other side is like, we need to match the expectations of what premium is for most people. So imagine that someone thinks that premium is extremely soft. Okay, but extremely soft, the durability will be much lower. because let's say that you use it for 6 months and it will be already squishy. And also maybe it's not even manufacturable, because maybe the skin at the top needs to be so flexible. And actually, I don't know if we have it around, but there's a gaming keyboard that we had around that had a very soft, let's say, pillow. But then you turn it around, and it's like the build forces you to have a very large palm rest, right? So here we're trying to do soft but firm and thin in this magnetic kind of form and so on, right? So for us, this outcome is premium. We came from having nice palm rests in the race and so on for many years, but still we went further to try to figure out how to do this, right? And now we're extremely satisfied. I feel like proud of this palm rest, even though there's people that use it without palm rest, and that's totally fine because the keyboard is designed in this way so you can do both things.
I think that connects with something that in some way is connected to premium, but it's not something that people see directly, but kind of like will feel. And it's I would try to find out what is unapologetically. Okay. So like you don't constrain your design to what's easy to manufacture or not. Mm-hmm. So you think, okay, what's the best for the user? What's gonna feel the best, even though making it will be much more complicated because of the limitations of the materials or the limitations of the manufacturing techniques or the complexity of the engineering. I think the palm pads are a good example of that, because engineering that was really complicated and manufacturing is also extremely complicated.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because we are saying this as if it's positive, but actually it's not, because the more time that you take to develop something, it has an opportunity because you're doing A, so you're not doing B. And if it's more expensive, then it's worse, because as a company, you need to have the higher margin as possible to continue doing products and so on, right? So a company that comes to mind as kind of having a good balance, a large one is Logitech. Logitech products are not premium by any means, but they kind of feel good enough to kind of scratching that surface. And by when I say Logitech, I don't mean the Logitech products from 10 years ago. I mean the Logitech products since they kind of rebranded and changed their identity. And you can see this in the ergonomic products, like for example the vertical mouse or the MX Master line for their mouse. It's like they know their industrial processors, they know their factories. Even if you check their PCBs or even in the keyboards, they do things that reduce the cost, but still the outcome is fine, right? So that's something that I think Dygma needs to learn of. Okay, how can you get the maximum with the minimum amount of development and so on? And by the way, I'm not saying that Logitech doesn't do a long development, but they strive this balance greatly.
Yes, and some other companies, go all in without thinking about this. So this balance is it's important within the process.
Yes, totally. Okay, so let's talk about something that it's not only Dygma related, like this awesome palm rest, but let's talk about keycaps, that it's kind of a controversial topic sometimes.
Yeah, and that's connected with the cultural thing that you mentioned before.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I don't know if the camera is able to pick it, but these are PVT double shot. Thank you. These are PVT double shot keycaps, and these are laser edge
polycarbonate keycaps.
Thank you. Yeah, because we were doing ABS keycaps, but for matter of durability, we changed them to PC. Okay, so PVT double shot keycaps are regarded as better than laser edge, and it totally makes sense, right? Because double shot keycaps, because they don't have paint, they basically last forever, right? But there's more things to have in mind with your keycaps, like the texture or the translucency. But being translucent, it's only important for some people, right? So for example, here we have 2 examples. These are PVT double shot keycaps, and I would say quite high quality. And these are PC in this case instead of ABS, but laser edge translucent keycaps. And I know that our keycaps are the best translucent keycaps in the market because we went to factories that they manufacture keycaps for all the gaming keyboards, and we went to many of them. We figured out which were the best keyboards in the market for lighting, and we understood their industrial processes, their manufacturing processes, and improved them.
I also worked on the paint and this and all the painting procedures, so yes, it's more durable than a standard laser edge keycap, for example.
Yeah, you have a double layer of gray, then you have a white layer, and then you have an UV coating layer on top of it, a part of the laser edge engraving, and it's done in a particular way that it's properly done, because you can still have all these layers and do it and not do it properly. But anyway, so these keycaps. Okay, so these have a fairly good thickness and a nice texture, right? And you would say, okay, so it has a nice texture, so this is high quality. Well, actually, you could argue against texture, but people will argue that it's positive. But for example, if you're the kind of person that has greasy hands, that some people have it, having more texture will eventually make it be more greasy and eventually be more dirty, right? So this means that you will have to clean these keycaps more. But the texture, the first time you touch it, is really nice, because it's kind of
grippy.
Yeah, very grippy. Yeah, that's a good word, right? And in the case of our keycaps are much softer. But this is a decision, because we could have a mold where there's more texture, right? But we did it in this way because we believe that this is softer to the touch and it's nicer.
It still has a little bit of texture, but not as much.
A bit, but just a tiny bit of texture. But when you touch it, it's kind of like quite soft,
yes.
quite nice, right? So can the laser edge keycaps avoid the fingerprints? Not really, right? Because that's a matter of the paint, UV coating, and so on. But could a higher quality keycaps avoid more fingerprints? Yes, totally. And that's what we've been able to do, right? So inside something that is considered less premium, like a laser edge keycaps, you still have categories. And I would say that this is the maximum category inside laser edge keycaps. So you could say that this is premium. But that's kind of our opinion, because you would ask anyone, they would say, no, that's laser edge keycaps. That's insert whatever nasty word that you want to say, right?
It's like the best ABS keycaps can be better than just a random low quality PBT. PBT is not automatically better.
Yes, and I would say that these are nice PBT keycaps. So I'm not saying that these are bad quality, but we've seen PBT keycaps that have like warps. I think it's called warp. Basically, when you inject the plastic and there's not enough thickness in the plastic of the surface of the keycap kind of warps and has a very weird look. So when you look at the keycap, you see that it's not properly done. Or we've seen keycaps that have a low level of translucency, or also the thickness of the walls is uneven, and so on. So
on the legends they're not properly designed, so there's cuts in the legends because of the double shot.
Yeah, or not even cuts. Like for example, I know the O is uneven. There's areas where it's thicker than others. So even inside this, let's say, premium PBT keycaps, actually you can have bad PBT keycaps, and the vast majority of PBT keycaps are quite bad. Anyway, this to understand the premiumness, right?
Culturally, people would think, okay, PBT is always better than laser edge, when it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not only culturally, because from a function standpoint, they're going to last longer. And when something lasts longer, if there's no clear drawback, then it's more premium, right? But if these keycaps are going to last, let's say that you're going to be using the same keyboard for 10 years and they're going to last, then it doesn't really matter. Maybe on the, I don't know, I'm just going to make it up, on the 20-year mark is when they break, right?
Okay.
But let's say that you're an extremely heavy user, that you're 14 hours a day in the computer hitting the keys all the time, right? And at the same time, greasy hands, and you don't take care of your keyboard and so on, then probably instead of lasting 20 years, they will last 7 years, right? But I would say that if you're that kind of user, even if you have PBT keycaps, your PBT keycaps are going to be disgusting, right? So I would say that in some senses, these double shot keycaps are overrated just for the sake of being double shot. I would say that double shot keycaps or PBT double shot keycaps that are well done are better than the laser edge keycaps that are well done.
The cap, the cap
the
of
top level, yes, exactly. But a well done laser ABS keycap, it could be better than basically all the random PBT double shot. Yeah, and this is just to give kind of some information of a potentially controversial topic, or something that for most people are kind of very clear. This is better than this. Well, it kind of depends, right?
So another thing that triggers me is that when doing reviews, there's many things that are not considered. That are completely forgotten about when it comes to talking about premium or not premium. For example, the cables.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think we have a cable.
Yeah, we have a few examples. We can see this one here, and this is the cable for our keyboards.
Yeah,
and I think we also have the cable for the Glove 80.
Yes,
which is this one.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe it's difficult to appreciate in the camera, but these cables that you can see here are these kind of cables that are rubbery, that they get dirt really quickly, and they kind of
break.
Exactly, they break kind of quickly, and by quickly I don't mean in 5 days, right? But we've all used these phone chargers that get so nasty, right? So if we compare this kind of cables, these are cables in completely different leagues, right? This is a braided cable that actually has a good shielding inside, and that's why it's quite rigid. And you could say that flexibility wise these cables are better than these ones, right? But when someone talks about cables, so this is a how is called this connector? I think it's called mini jack.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a mini jack.
Well, actually it's a TTRS cable.
Okay, TTRS cable, thank you. So we have a TTRS cable, and here we have a USB-C cable, and this is like, I wouldn't say crap quality, but I mean, in a consumer electronic product that it's not a cheap one, this is the cheapest that you will find, right? And no one talks about cables, but the cables are something important. Even though we are creating wireless products, still sometimes you have to use them, and durability is one of the features that we consider premium. So why people don't talk about cables, right? Yes. And that's something that we've put a lot of effort, and that we think it's really important, is that, hey, let's have high quality cables, but real high quality cables. And we believe that we're making the highest quality cables out there, at least in the ergonomic realm. We would love to have this finishing and durability with flexibility, right? But it's very difficult to pass the MC tests, sorry, the electromagnetical tests with very flexible cables, because this means that they don't have shielding, right? And when doing the tests, cables act like antennas, right? So anyway, reviewers say, oh, the build quality is great, but they ignore this kind of flimsy cables. And I'm not trying to attack this keyboard particular at all. Like, this is overall, I see this all the time. For example, Apple, that is a brand considered premium, their chargers, their cables are not premium at all.
Yeah, really bad.
Yeah, and still those cables are better than these ones because they are Apple and they figure out how to do it great. But if you check their, I think it's the MacBook Pro line, they have braided cables,
yes.
right?
And they have this magnetic connector back.
Exactly, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, cables is a topic that is kind of ignored and shouldn't, because it affects the user experience, and it affects the durability of the product, right? And the Moergo one, I would say, is a tad worse than this one, but they are kind of in the same realm.
Yeah, and talking about things that are not looked upon or not looked into, I think it's always turning the keyboard around. I think we did that with the
Yes.
with the keycard, but you have to look at everything on the keyboard. I don't know, maybe when I turn it around, I'm not sure. Yeah, if I turn around hours. I don't know if this one in black is not fully.
No, I'll turn the race to around. I'm going to turn it off so it's clearer to see. Yeah, but there's a few things that we consider good practices and bad practices. For example, usually when you can see the screws, usually this is considered not premium. But at the same time, when you have access to the screws, then it's easier to open and repair. And actually, maybe I can show here. Yeah, for example, this is a Voyager, and all the keyboards that we buy, we open them, obviously. Yes. So we had to remove the sticker, and there's two screws underneath, so we have to remove the sticker to open it, right? All companies say that when you open your products, you lose your warranty, right? And you lose, I don't know, void. Thank you very much. You void the warranty, right? But when we're talking about kind of this build quality, okay, there's subtle details, right? So for example, maybe this sounds very elitist, but the kind of screws that you're using, right? So you can pick the cheapest ones, or you can pick ones that are flush or that are rounded and so on.
Or how many match the color, like these ones are black and those are silver, for example.
Yeah, exactly, and so on. And what kind of rubber feet do you have? Like these are rubber feet that are basically designed for this keyboard. These are just rubber feet that they're off the shelf and so on, right? But the thing is, like, here we're getting into
detail.
Into detail that the vast majority of people won't care, because this is like buying a trouser and looking inside the trouser, you know. So only crazy people like maybe like us, yes, like us, will value this. But the vast majority of people won't really care about this, right? So then again, we're getting kind of deeper into this understanding of premium. So it's about the quality of the materials. It's about, you were mentioning the UX, how comfortable it is to open this. It could be a...
Yes, I think that's something that's not considered premium by most people, like the repairability. For example, Apple is a premium brand,
famous for not being able to repair the products. Impossible.
iFixit has always a 0 out of 10
yes.
with Apple products, because it's very difficult to open. There's always glue and
whatever
hidden things and whatnot, things that are not changeable, or you need to change the whole thing. So that's something that I think within the realm of ergonomic keyboards, most of them are fairly easy to open and repair. So that's a thing that we all appreciate and consider premium.
Yeah, and I think seeing it like this, so I think it's a good segue to materials, right? Okay, so basically everyone knows that aluminum is superior to plastic, durability, feeling, etc. But there's different levels of plastic. And our keyboards are made from aluminum, but the bottom part is plastic, although it has this mylar to kind of keep this overall look, right? Okay, so let's talk about different levels of plastic and build quality. So here we have 3 plastic keyboards, okay, but they're built quite different. So let's start with the wire. So this one is a keyboard where the case kind of looks like metal.
Yeah, so feels like metal.
Kinda, yeah. To be honest, it's quite compact. Even though it's small, it's quite heavy, and this heaviness kind of gives it a little bit of this how to say it, feeling, right?
Yeah.
And also the thickness of the plastic it's quite thick, right? So I would say that even though it's plastic, and plastic is worse than aluminum basically always, it's well done. It has a good build quality.
And also, I think the bottom piece is actually metal.
Yeah.
So it
gives weight. Yeah, exactly.
Feels more premium.
Yeah,
weight
exactly.
always tends to feel premium.
Then we have the Moonlander, and I think we can clearly say that it's a kind of level under in build quality in the plastic, and also this is an older product than this one, so actually it makes sense too. But you can see it in this kind of hinges and kind of the construction and thickness and so on. It's kind of let's call it a bit raw. Okay.
Yeah. I would say that even if it's plastic, what they accomplish with the plastic, it's fairly
very nice.
You know, it doesn't look cheap. You know, it doesn't look as cheap, but it doesn't look like a unfinished product.
Although it doesn't look bad, there's design elements that I think shouldn't really be there. Like for example, you see this hinge for the thumb. This ribs here, this shouldn't be here. This should be inside the keyboard. Same like this bump and this cut and so on. There's multiple of this, but I wouldn't say this is the material. This is more like the design, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe this connects with what I mentioned, that there's things that you do on the design that affect manufacturing, and you have to keep this balance. Mm-hmm. And maybe sometimes you need to take, okay, this is, if they make this design decision, it would be more difficult to manufacture.
Yeah, and actually in ZSA products, I can see how they optimize heavily for manufacturing, and I would say that they keep large margins because of this. So from that point of view, from the business standpoint, I think they do a good job, right? Because they make simple things, like very simple things, and then they are selling them at a very high price, right?
But also maybe just to build the counterpart, with this simple manufacturing process, they can ensure a good overall, I would say, quality control. So they keep
could be, yeah.
Everything
is easier.
Everything is easier. It doesn't, it's less complicated.
Yeah, and this benefits the company because you have less issues, and if you have less issues, you have more energy, time, and money to develop more things, and so on. So yeah, totally. So that something has a simple or has large margins is not a negative thing, right? Okay, and then moving on to kind of, we would say that this was kind of on the plastic side, the higher level, right? I would say this is the mid level. But when we grab the More Ergo and the Glove 80, so it kind of feels like a AliExpress copy, let's say. And I don't want to say this like a I'm attacking it or whatever, but it's like extremely light, and how it flexes, right? And
the finish of the plastic
yeah,
itself.
exactly. The finish of the plastic is a little bit shiny, right? And even when you touch it, how it sounds, because you're touching the feet, like it kind of really feels cheap, right? Even the keycaps, if you really compare the level of keycaps, these keycaps are in a completely different category at these ones.
Yeah, because these ones are double shot PBT, and those ones are not even double shot, or they're not even shine through their.
Yes, and these keycaps.
Very careful.
Yes, these keycaps, I would say that they are sub-die, and
single shot keycap.
Yeah, but not only this, is like there's nothing particular about these keycaps that says quality. But when we are talking about build quality, I would say these are on different leagues, and you could say that we went overboard on the premium side, and customers don't care that much. But on the durability side, on the feeling, when you grab this, how heavy it is, when you touch it, everything is like a higher level. Although we could say that on the keycaps, people that prefer PBT keycaps obviously are going to say that these keycaps are better, right? But if I had to choose between our PC Laser Edge, these keycaps and these ones, for sure every day I would go with these ones, right? Because this is the example of just random keycaps, right?
I would say that connects with the beginning of the video, that big question, what does premium feel? Because when you see reviews of these keyboards, there's not, they are not considered well built.
No, and actually I watched a video where a reviewer said that the Globe 80 had a great build quality, but compared to what? This is what we were talking about, the subjectiveness of the perception of build quality, and how this is related to personal taste, but also cultural tastes, right? Maybe this person hasn't been exposed to premium objects or premium devices, right? And maybe they check this and they say, oh yeah, this is premium. Well, it would be great that they would explain in detail why, right?
I think this maybe connects with this easiness of use or simplicity, and maybe, I don't know, I would never call that premium myself, but I've seen all of these keyboards being called premium and not making up when they compare it with the Defy. They don't stand out, the Defy, because of it being premium.
Yeah.
When we would, knowing how these are made, and with our knowledge of keyboard manufacturing, we know everything that's gone into inside of these keyboards and inside of our keyboards, right? So that's what I think maybe confuses us. Maybe the understanding of premium is different. Maybe you consider premium something that we consider, whether we don't consider premium, and the other way around.
Yeah, and it's our duty as a brand to understand what our potential customers want and they appreciate and value, right? If we make a great effort on making something premium, but then it's not understood or not appreciated, then it's actually our fault. We need to adjust, because maybe we're spending a lot of time, energy, or money on trying to create something that it's not valued. So if people think that something that is not premium is premium, then the understanding of premium shifts from what it is to what it's not, but it doesn't matter. It becomes a new definition of premium, right? And maybe only when someone that comes from the outside world, when I say outside world, I mean, let's say cars or whatever, then analyzes the product, maybe they bring this term again, right? But something really important is like why it matters. That was one of the questions at the beginning, why it matters. So it cannot matter at all if you're not able to value it, okay? But this we're kind of in the emotional side. But let's talk about the feature side, okay? Durability really matters. If you spend so much money in a keyboard, you want that keyboard to last for a long time, right? And also in the functionality, for example, if I hit F5, I can move forward this keyboard, right?
Yes.
So
it slides.
It slides, yes, and it slides because of this rubber feet. And I'm using this as an example, but with the tenting, if you place the tenting and it wobbles, then it's not accomplishing its function, right? So the premium side is that, okay, all these features work as they are intended. And something that you were talking about is UX. Not only they work as intended, but they are easy to use, easy to configure when you're in the process of using it or configure it. Or once you notice nothing because it's kind of seamless, or two, but you notice you like it. It's really nice, right? And that's kind of like another level, at least from my point of view, of premium. When it's seamless, or even the feedback that you kind of the emotional feedback is positive, right?
Yeah, that would be like a next step of within premium. I think maybe something that people. So one thing that we do is uncompromised design, right? We'll go all in and we try to, I don't know, our thumb cluster is custom designed, right? These shapes are made only for us, while other thumb clusters use just
Regular keycaps.
regular keycaps. Is this something, and this might affect, the time that we spend to design something else,
For sure, yes.
right? And is this something that is valid or not?
Yeah, and you could say this is a premium feature. Well, there's a good question here, because this thumb cluster is much more difficult to use than this one, because this one has 2 buttons, right? But things like this one has 6. So if you use one or another, like you could remove this 2, and now it has the same amount of keys. Like, which one is easier to use? Like, obviously we would say this one. Maybe we're a bit biased, but we've put so much time and thought on designing this, and even we have this kind of weird shaped keycap at the edge, so it's easier to transition. Yeah, so this should be considered premium in
our view of what premium is.
Yes, but at the same time, it's more complicated to use than this one. So if something is confusing, then it's not premium anymore, because it's confusing.
Yeah, I think it also happens maybe with our tenting. Our tenting is a great example of that. We design the tenting in a way that we believe it's premium, so it folds, so you can just easily fold it, and then you can put the keyboard flat. While other tenting, maybe we can bring the Moonlander. There you go. You actually need a tool.
Yeah, exactly.
You need a tool to move this into position, and then you need to, I think, screw it, and then you need to place that bit here. There you go. That's locked. Okay. So maybe that's more straightforward. For example, the issue that we have with our tenting is that if you don't deploy the side legs, you need to deploy them, and then you place them into position. And then the keyboard, you turn it around and it's perfect. But if you don't do that and you place it into position, then this
wobble,
this wobble here,
yeah,
right?
so,
and people would be like,
"Oh, there's wobbling.
This wobbling is not premium."
Yeah,
but
it's flimsy.
It's flimsy.
It's not well made or well built and so on.
Exactly.
But the truth is, like, you're not using the feature properly. But it's our duty as keyboard designer to ensure that people know how to use it.
Exactly, and then they either it's in the manual, but they read the manual and nobody reads the manual.
So for sure.
And so it has to be a UX, and we have to do an improvement in that regard. But for us, and also the people say, "Hey, this is metal, and that's gonna be more sturdy," but it flimsies.
Yeah, exactly. But it's uncomfortable to set up. It requires an extra tool. You have to screw it, etc. But yeah, anyway, how can we wrap these thoughts about the premium?
Yeah, I think I will go back to the beginning about thinking about when you think about premium. We think about these 3 things to consider. 1, what does that object make you feel? And I think in that regard, premium is important in life, because I want things that give me pleasure. That are pleasurable to use.
And this could be visual, or this could be tactile, but this could be kind of the whole experience, right?
Exactly.
Of using it through the days and so on.
And then on the product side, I want things that last.
Okay.
And then if they break, eventually, that I can repair.
Okay, so for you, the repairability side is inside premium.
Yes, for me it is. Okay. I know this would be a topic to discuss, because I have this keyboard, but I also have a MacBook. So, maybe it's not critical for me.
Maybe you're a bit of a hypocrite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. And also, maybe there's something that it's not considered, but for me, if I have an issue with a product, I would like to not only be able to repair it myself, but also be able to, let's say, talk with customer support or whatever and have a great service. But maybe here we're talking about premium object or keyboard and a premium brand with a great service, right? Yes. I think that's another thing that I value. Another thing that I highly value, but is very difficult to attain, is have a seamless experience, right? What we talked in other videos about being able to transition from cable to wireless to Bluetooth seamlessly, and being able to configure anything very easily with Basecor, with our software and so on. So these are things that I think I value highly, but many people don't, because many people don't care that you need to click a billion times and flash the keyboard every single time you want to change a few keys. But with our software, just click, save, and then it's saved, right? It's a process that takes 15 seconds instead of 3 minutes, and I value highly this, right?
Yeah, but other people in the other hand would value the stability.
Yes.
You know, if I do this click and now it's Bluetooth, and click and now it's wired, and I don't have to worry about this seamless transition that might generate some kind of UX misunderstanding.
Yeah, because if you have a UX misunderstanding or you experience any kind of bug, it doesn't matter that the keyboard feels premium, because this kind of destroys the experience, right? So stability is one of the bases of this premium feel. Yeah. And I think striving for balance on trying to develop something new and doing something that doesn't really exist, and at the same time having this stability is kind of difficult, right?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult balance, and I think that maybe that is what is where this point where maybe we are more tolerant to these things and still consider something premium, and some other people that it just works is at the core of premium, that it should just work.
That makes sense, yes.
And maybe here's where that's this dissonance between different understandings of what premium is. And I think also connects with Apple, or with just talk Apple, for example. Most of the things just work.
Just work, yes.
99% of the time. But with Apple, when something doesn't work, you don't know. It's really difficult to troubleshoot. Because it's like, why is it not working?
Yeah, and then you have Windows where you can kind of troubleshoot, and then you have Linux on. It's kind
of like always troubleshooting.
You live in troubleshooting mode.
But you know that, so you're aware. So
you're ready, yeah. Okay, so what are your thoughts on premium? What does premium build quality mean for you? And have you had positive or negative experiences in the kind of ergonomic keyboard realm? Because we have in some cases base, but in other cases kind of quite deep understanding of premium, deep in the sense of manufacturing, industrial processes, and materials, and so on. But at the same time, because we have that knowledge, we are kind of biased in a way that we may be too distant from the consumer or the final user that maybe don't have this information. And at the end of the day, kind of our duty is to create awesome products for these regular people that want to use ergonomic keyboards.
And also maybe what you said at the beginning, maybe premium is not that important.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's just all about comfort, you know, exactly what you find comfortable, or maybe
easy to use,
simplicity, and maybe that extra complexity of a more over-engineered product, you know, throws you off, and you would like something that is more just to the point.
Yeah.
With no...
That maybe you don't even want to change the layers that much, for example.
Yes, exactly.
But anyway, please let us know. We had this conversation in a very open way, and none of the products that we have here, we consider that they are bad products at all.
No.
We actually think that these are the best ergonomic keyboards out there. And if you look online, you will find people talking great things about these ones. But in this specific topic of kind of this build quality, premium, and so on, we believe that there are some misunderstandings, right, or misconceptions. So please let us know. And thank you, Miguel.
Yeah, thank you, Luis, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.